Imagine walking into your apartment building every night, not with relief, but with dread. That was the reality for Danielle Harper, a single mother in her early 30s who lived in a modest two-bedroom on Sycamore Street, just outside of Chicago. To the world, Danielle looked like resilience personified. She worked long shifts as a nurse's aide at the local hospital, came home exhausted, and still found the strength to help her 8-year-old daughter, Layla, with homework at the kitchen table. But behind her smile, she carried a quiet weight, the weight of knowing her landlord, Mr. Ronald Briggs, saw her not as a tenant, but as a burden. Briggs was the kind of landlord who wore his power like armor. Mid-50s, silver hair slicked back, expensive watch on his wrist. He walked the hallways not with concern, but with suspicion. Every rent check Danielle paid was met with thinly veiled disdain, as if her money somehow carried less value than anyone else's. The building itself reflected his attitude. Peeling paint in the hallways, broken laundry machines that hadn't worked in months, and a heating system that clanked through the winter nights but rarely delivered warmth. Complaints went unanswered. Requests for repairs were ignored. And Danielle, she endured it. Because like so many tenants living paycheck to paycheck, moving wasn't an option. This was the roof she could afford over her daughter's head. But then, one evening, everything changed. It was late summer, the kind of sticky Chicago night where the air feels heavy. Danielle had just returned from work, scrubs clinging to her skin, when she saw Briggs standing at her door. "Rent's due tomorrow," he said flatly, eyeing her like she was already late. Danielle nodded, holding up her bag. "I just got off my shift. I'll bring it down in the morning, like I always do." But instead of nodding back, Briggs sneered. "You people, always with excuses. You know what you are, Danielle?" His voice dripped with venom. "You're trash. Living here, dragging this place down. Trash." The word cut through her like glass. Trash. Not a tenant. Not a mother. Not a woman working double shifts to make ends meet. Just trash. Danielle froze. For a moment, she thought she'd misheard. But the smirk on his face confirmed it. And in that moment, something inside her shifted. Because while she had endured his neglect, his arrogance, his silence when the heater broke, this was different. This wasn't about broken pipes or peeling paint. This was about her dignity. Danielle didn't say a word to Briggs that night. She just closed the door slowly, her hands trembling, her daughter's wide eyes peeking from the couch. But inside, a fire had been lit. Because Danielle had someone in her corner she hadn't yet called upon. Someone who wasn't just family, but family with power. And when she picked up the phone that night, the first words out of her mouth weren't tears. They were resolve. "Cousin Marcus, I need your help." That night, Danielle lay awake in her small bedroom, staring at the ceiling fan spinning lazily above. Her daughter Layla slept peacefully beside her, clutching her favorite stuffed bunny. Danielle ran her hand through her daughter's curls and whispered a silent promise. "No one is ever going to call me, or us, trash again." But as the hours stretched on, the word echoed louder in her mind. Trash. She thought of every shift she had worked, every sleepless night, every moment she had pushed through exhaustion so her daughter wouldn't go without. She thought of the years she had paid her rent on time, month after month, even when it meant skipping meals for herself. And yet, with a single word, Briggs had tried to strip all of that away. The next morning, Danielle made two decisions. First, she would not be silent. Second, she would call her cousin Marcus. Marcus Johnson wasn't just family. He was a fighter. At 36 years old, Marcus was a successful civil rights attorney in downtown Chicago. He had built his career on cases that most lawyers avoided: housing discrimination, employment bias, systemic injustice. He knew the law, but more importantly, he knew how power worked and how to dismantle it. When Danielle dialed his number, she expected him to tell her to calm down, maybe to let it go. But instead, when she recounted every word Briggs had said, Marcus went silent for a long moment. Then he said just one thing. "Cousin, they picked the wrong family this time." 2 days later, Briggs called another meeting. He framed it as a discussion about late fees, but Danielle knew better. She walked into the cramped office in the basement of the building, her daughter holding her hand, and found Briggs already seated. His arms were folded. His smirk was back. "Glad you could make it. I was beginning to think responsibility wasn't really your strong suit." But this time, Danielle didn't come alone. The door opened again, and in walked Marcus, suit sharp, briefcase in hand, gaze steady as stone. Briggs frowned. "And you are?" Marcus didn't flinch. "I'm Marcus Johnson, Tenants Counsel. And her cousin." The shift in the room was immediate. The arrogance in Briggs' posture faltered. His smirk twitched. Because suddenly, this wasn't just about a landlord berating a tenant. This was about a landlord facing the law. What you're hearing right now isn't just a family story, it's a reflection of a much bigger struggle. Tenants across the country face intimidation and bias every day, often without the resources to fight back. If you believe these stories matter, pause for a moment to like this video, subscribe to Melanin Chronicles, and turn on the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss the next story of resilience and justice we bring to light. Briggs cleared his throat. "What? This doesn't need to be formal. We can just talk this out." Marcus leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. "Oh, we'll talk. But it will be formal. Because when you call a hardworking mother trash, and you threaten her home, that's not just disrespect. That's harassment. And harassment, Mr. Briggs, has consequences." For the first time since she'd moved into that building, Danielle watched Briggs lose control of the room. And in that moment, she realized something powerful. She wasn't powerless after all. The next few weeks were a whirlwind for Danielle. Marcus didn't just walk into that basement office to scare Briggs. He walked in with a plan. "Listen," Marcus told her later that night at her kitchen table, stacks of papers spread between them. "Landlords like Briggs get away with this because most tenants don't know their rights. But you've got me. And we're going to show him he can't bully people into silence." Danielle listened as Marcus laid out the steps. First, document everything. Every voicemail, every letter, every offhand insult. Second, gather witnesses, other tenants who had stories of Briggs' intimidation. Third, file a formal complaint with the housing authority. And finally, if Briggs pushed any further, take him to court. It didn't take long for the cracks to show. Danielle started knocking on doors in the building, nervous at first, but gaining courage with every conversation. To her surprise, tenants opened up. One elderly man admitted Briggs had raised his rent illegally, banking on the fact that he didn't have family to help him fight back. A young mother confessed Briggs had threatened to evict her after she complained about a broken heater in the middle of winter. Another tenant said Briggs often muttered under his breath about people bringing down the neighborhood, and everyone knew exactly who he meant. Danielle's anger grew with every story. It wasn't just her. This was a pattern. By the time she brought her notes back to Marcus, her binder was thick with testimonies. He flipped through the pages, a satisfied smile tugging at his lips. "Good. Very good. You've just built a case stronger than anything I could have found on my own." Briggs, however, wasn't backing down. The more Danielle asserted herself, the more hostile he became. One afternoon, she found a notice taped to her door. "Failure to pay rent will result in eviction proceedings." Except Danielle had the receipts. She had paid every month on time. When she stormed into Marcus's office with the notice in hand, he chuckled softly and tapped the paper. Classic scare tactic. But now he's made a mistake. He's created evidence against himself. The showdown came sooner than expected. Briggs, still confident in his position, filed eviction papers at the county courthouse. He thought Danielle would crumble under the pressure. He thought she'd pack up and leave quietly. But when the court date arrived, Danielle didn't walk in alone. She walked in with Marcus, briefcase in one hand, law books under the other, his presence commanding the room before a word was spoken. Briggs sat on the opposite side of the courtroom, suddenly less smug than before. For the first time, he looked like a man who realized the ground under his feet was about to give way. And he was right. The morning sun poured through the tall courthouse windows, but for Danielle, the air felt heavy. She clutched Layla's hand tightly, her heart pounding as they approached the courtroom doors. Layla looked up at her mother. "Mommy, are we going to lose our home?" Danielle knelt down, brushing her daughter's cheek. "No, baby. Not today. Not ever. Not while we fight." Inside, The room buzzed with quiet tension. The judge sat high above, his glasses perched low as he shuffled through the stack of cases for the day. On the left, Briggs leaned back in his chair, trying to project confidence. On the right, Marcus spread his documents neatly on the table, calm and collected. When the judge finally called their case, Briggs was the first to speak. "Your Honor, this tenant has failed to meet her obligations. She's disruptive, behind on rent, and frankly, an unfit occupant of my property. I'm requesting immediate eviction." The words cut Danielle, but she didn't flinch. Not this time. Marcus stood, buttoning his jacket slowly before addressing the judge. His voice was steady, but every word carried weight. "Your Honor, my cousin Danielle has never missed a payment. I have here bank records and receipts that confirm each month's rent, paid on time, in full." He handed the documents to the clerk, who passed them up to the judge. Briggs shifted in his seat. Marcus didn't stop. "Not only has Mr. Briggs falsely accused my client of non-payment, but we also have reason to believe he has engaged in a consistent pattern of harassment and discriminatory practices against her and other tenants." He reached into his briefcase and produced Danielle's binder, thick with testimonies. These are written statements from residents in the building. They describe intimidation, neglect, and targeted comments from Mr. Briggs that create a hostile living environment. The judge's brows furrowed as he flipped through the pages. Briggs leapt to his feet. "This is nonsense. Tenants always complain when they don't want to follow the rules. She's exaggerating. She's—" Marcus cut him off with surgical precision. "Exaggerating? Your Honor, let me quote Mr. Briggs directly. In a recorded phone message, he referred to my client as, and I quote, trash." The word echoed in the courtroom. A hush fell over the room. Even the judge leaned back in his chair, his expression tightening. Marcus let the silence linger before continuing. "Now, Your Honor, tell me, is that the language of a landlord acting in good faith? Or is that evidence of a man abusing his power to demean and intimidate his tenants?" Briggs stammered. That was taken out of context." Marcus's voice sharpened. "The only context here is the truth. You called a hardworking mother trash. You tried to weaponize the legal system to evict her under false pretenses. And you thought no one would hold you accountable." The judge leaned forward, his tone stern. "Mr. Briggs, I find these allegations deeply concerning. The court takes claims of harassment and discrimination very seriously. Based on the evidence presented, I see no grounds for eviction. In fact, I am ordering an investigation into your conduct as landlord of this property." Danielle's breath caught. She glanced at Marcus, who gave her a reassuring nod. For the first time in months, the weight pressing on her chest began to lift. Across the room, Briggs's face paled. His arrogance had drained away, replaced with something else entirely, fear. But this wasn't just victory in the courtroom. This was vindication. Danielle knew her worth. And thanks to Marcus, the world did too. The gavel struck the desk, signaling the end of the hearing. Briggs shuffled out of the courtroom, his shoulders slumped, his arrogance shattered. For years he had ruled his building with intimidation and insults. But today, for the first time, he had been forced to face accountability. Danielle sat still for a moment, letting the judge's words sink in. She wasn't going to lose her home. She wasn't going to be bullied anymore. And most importantly, Layla wouldn't have to grow up thinking her mother was powerless. Tears welled in Danielle's eyes as she hugged Marcus tightly. "You don't know what this means to me," she whispered. Marcus smiled. "I do. And it's just the beginning. Because this case? It's not just about you. It's about everyone Briggs has tried to intimidate. And now, the law is watching him." In the weeks that followed, word spread quickly through the building. Tenants who once kept their heads down now walked a little taller. Some even slipped notes under Danielle's door, thanking her for standing up. "Because of you, I finally filed my complaint," one note read. "Thank you for showing us we're not alone," another said. The housing authority launched a formal investigation. Inspectors combed through the property, uncovering years of neglected maintenance and shady financial practices. Soon after, Briggs was slapped with multiple fines and forced to step down as manager. For the first time in decades, the building began to feel like a community again. Safe, respected, and proud. But for Danielle, the real victory wasn't the downfall of Briggs. It was the transformation in her daughter's eyes. One night, as she tucked Layla into bed, her little girl whispered, "Mommy, you're the strongest person I know." Danielle smiled, kissing her forehead. "No, baby. We're strong together." And for the first time in a long while, she believed it. Danielle's story is more than just a fight with a landlord. It's a reminder that dignity is not given, it's claimed. That no insult, no label, no abuse of power can define you when you stand in your truth. How many other mothers, fathers, and families have been told they were less than, only to rise and prove otherwise? How many more stories of quiet resilience go unheard every single day? That's why we tell these stories here, not just to expose injustice, but to remind you that no one has the right to strip away your worth. Because when someone calls you trash, but you know your value, that's when the tables turn. That's when resilience wins. If Danielle's story moved you, don't let it end here. Like this video, share it with someone who needs the reminder, and subscribe to Melanin Chronicles. Every week, we bring you powerful stories of injustice, resilience, and triumph. Stories that prove strength runs deeper than struggle. Because here, we don't just tell stories. We reclaim them.